Since the dawn of consciousness, humankind has sensed a quiet presence lurking behind thought, a whisper just beneath awareness, something that tempts, deceives, manipulates, and feeds. From the deserts of ancient Mesopotamia to the glowing screens of our modern world, the battle for the human mind has never ceased. Every age names its demons differently: spirits, jinn, archons, propaganda, algorithms, but the essence remains the same. There are forces that seek to own our thoughts. The human mind is both a temple and a battlefield. It creates worlds, and it can destroy them. It can reach the divine or drown in its own illusions. And through every shadowed corridor of history, the same question echoes: who truly controls your mind? Is it you, the conscious self, the thinker behind the eyes? Or is it something else, unseen yet ever-present, whispering from the dark? This is the story of how invisible powers, spiritual, psychological, and technological, have fought to possess the most sacred territory of all: human consciousness. Long before the language of psychology and neuroscience, our ancestors already understood the mind as a place of cosmic struggle. They believed thoughts were not entirely one's own. They could be planted, whispered by gods or demons, angels or tricksters. In ancient Sumer, priests spoke of Giddim, restless spirits who fed upon human fear and confusion. Egyptians believed the heart housed the soul, and that malevolent forces known as Isfit, chaos, could corrupt it if left unguarded. In Zoroastrianism, the universe was a war between Ahura Mazda, the light of wisdom, and Ahriman, the deceiver, whose weapon was mental darkness. Even the earliest scriptures, from the Vedas to the Torah, warned of the same unseen manipulation. Evil begins not in the world, but in thought. The greatest trick of the deceiver, said many sages, is not to show himself, but to make you believe you act of your own will. In Greece, philosophers and mystics alike pondered this invisible influence. Plato described the human psyche as a charioteer struggling to control two horses, one noble, one wild, symbolic of reason and desire. The Stoics warned that passions and illusions could enslave the mind more completely than any chains. And in the darker corners of ancient mysticism, daimons, intermediaries between gods and mortals, could twist thought, causing confusion and obsession. The ancient world didn't separate mind from spirit. To lose control of one's mind was to fall under possession. A king who grew paranoid, a warrior who lost mercy, a poet who descended into madness. All were said to have opened the gates of their psyche to darker entities. Across continents, the same story unfolded. Evil forces cannot conquer humanity by force, only by influence. They don't seize the body, they corrupt the will. They don't destroy the mind, they rewrite it. When Babylonian exorcists chanted to expel spirits, they weren't merely performing superstition. They were symbolically cleansing thought. To them, every destructive emotion was an invasion. Anger, envy, hatred. These were seen as entities that entered the human vessel through cracks in virtue. The Christian world later inherited this view. In its theology, Satan was not a mere being, but a principle, the accuser, the tempter, the deceiver of minds. Christ's desert temptation, for instance, was not a physical confrontation, but a psychological assault on purpose, identity, and obedience. It was mind warfare disguised as spiritual trial. In the East, Buddhist teachings spoke of Mara, the tempter who prevents enlightenment by clouding perception. He doesn't attack with weapons. He distracts the seeker with illusions, desire, doubt, fear. Sound familiar? Even now, these same forces exist wearing new names: marketing, social comparison, anxiety. In all traditions, the first battleground of evil is attention. Once the enemy seizes the focus, it shapes the thought. And thought, repeated often enough, becomes belief. Why do humans hear the whisper? Because the mind is porous, constantly absorbing impressions, ideas, and emotions from its environment. The ancients described this openness as both a gift and a curse. To be receptive meant one could receive divine inspiration, but also be infected by alien thoughts. From this idea arose rituals, prayers, and disciplines, ancient technologies of the mind designed to guard inner space. The recitation of mantras, the use of holy symbols, the lighting of incense, all served one purpose: to anchor the consciousness in light so that no shadow could enter unseen. But over time, humanity forgot the symbolic meaning behind these acts. The rituals remained, but the understanding decayed. The fortress of the mind began to crumble, brick by brick, under centuries of distraction, materialism, and pride. As civilizations advanced, belief in unseen forces waned. Reason replaced faith, science replaced myth. Yet even as we dismissed demons as fantasy, their essence transformed, evolving into subtler psychological and social mechanisms. The battlefield of the soul became the battlefield of ideas. Empires learned that controlling bodies was less effective than controlling minds. Religion turned into dogma. Politics became theater. Knowledge became weaponized. The whisper had found new disguises. And so, the ancient war for the mind, once fought with charms and prayers, began to merge with philosophy, propaganda, and psychology. If the ancients feared invisible spirits, we now face invisible algorithms. If they trembled before the whisper of demons, we now submit to the voice of mass influence. Different age, same war. Only the masks have changed. Every war begins inside. Before propaganda, before possession, before any external voice can command the soul, something within must open the gate. That opening is the human shadow. Modern psychology calls it the unconscious, a vast reservoir of forgotten memories, instincts, and desires. Carl Jung called its darker portion the shadow self. The traits we deny because they contradict our image of goodness. When these denied parts are oppressed, they do not vanish. They wait. They leak into dreams, obsessions, outbursts, addictions. And when a person finally says, "I don't know why I did that," it is often the shadow taking the wheel. Ancient mystics described the same thing in moral language. Demons of anger, spirits of envy, voices of temptation. But psychology translates it into cognitive bias and emotional possession. What religion called sin, science now calls compulsion. The mind is not a fortress of reason. It is an ecosystem. Every emotion, every memory, every belief competes for dominance like organisms in a forest. When fear or desire grows unchecked, it crowds out empathy and logic. Advertisers, political strategists, even cult leaders understand this. They speak not to the intellect, but to the limbic brain, the seat of survival and reward. Fear tightens attention. Anger creates certainty. Pleasure teaches repetition. 3 simple levers, and the mind begins to move on its own, believing it acts freely. Psychologists have cataloged dozens of built-in weaknesses that make thought malleable. Confirmation bias, groupthink, authority bias, the illusion of control. Each one is a doorway for manipulation. When an influencer repeats your opinion back to you, you feel seen, and the gate opens wider. When a tribe tells you that outsiders are dangerous, adrenaline floods, reasoning narrows, and another gate swings open. Little by little, the architecture of autonomy collapses. These are not mystical forces. They are mechanisms, but they achieve what the ancients feared: the seizure of the human will. Trauma is perhaps the most intimate method of control. A wounded mind seeks relief, and whoever offers it becomes its master. Totalitarian regimes, abusive partners, and cult leaders alike exploit this, break the psyche, then rebuild it in your image. Neurologically, trauma engraves pathways that make the sufferer hypervigilant, obedient, desperate for belonging. The new belief system, however destructive, feels like safety. This is why exorcisms, deprogrammings, and therapies all resemble one another. They attempt to rewrite the story that pain once wrote. Addiction is the purest modern symbol of possession. A chemical, a behavior, or a relationship hijacks the brain's dopamine circuits until the self becomes a servant to its craving. No devil required, only neurochemistry. Yet the experience is identical to the ancient descriptions. Voices urging one more drink, one more scroll, one more hit. The addict knows the act is killing them and still obeys. That is mind control at its most intimate. Contemporary neuroscience adds an unsettling footnote. Many decisions arise milliseconds before we consciously choose them. The brain acts, then the mind explains. If awareness lags behind impulse, then who truly decides? The ancients answered with stories of possession. Psychologists answer with data, but the unease is the same. Human freedom is delicate, easily swayed by suggestion, hormone, habit, or herd. Collectively, humanity projects its inner conflicts onto the world. The same greed, fear, and vanity that haunt individuals also shape nations and markets. A civilization at war with its own conscience breeds systems of control, surveillance, censorship, spectacle. The outer demons are born from inner ones. When millions share the same fear, that fear gains a life of its own, an egregore of anxiety, a culture of outrage. No single villain commands it. It emerges from the sum of our unchecked emotions. And yet, like any entity, it demands feeding with attention. Attention is the modern soul. Where it goes, energy flows, economies thrive, ideologies spread. Every notification, every headline, every advertisement competes for a fragment of consciousness. Each victory rewires the brain slightly, reshaping preferences and memories. This is not witchcraft. It is behavioral economics, but it fulfills the same ancient prophecy. Those who control attention control minds. So the enemy no longer needs horns or darkness. It only needs your gaze. It needs you to look again and again until looking becomes worship. Yet within this machinery lies a counterforce, awareness itself. The act of seeing manipulation weakens it. When a person steps back and watches their anger rise without acting on it, the spell breaks. Meditation, journaling, therapy. These are secular exorcisms, returning ownership to the witness behind thought. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To face the shadow is to end its rule. Interestingly, the shadow is not purely malevolent. It holds creativity, courage, sexuality, and individuality. Energies society often represses. When integrated rather than denied, these forces become strength instead of sabotage. History's greatest reformers and artists touched this fire without letting it consume them. They turned inner chaos into vision. The lesson is older than any scripture. The same energy that enslaves can liberate, depending on who holds the reins. The battlefield, then, is not somewhere outside us. It is the quiet space between stimulus and response, between impulse and awareness. In that space lives freedom, or captivity. And the whisper that ancient priests once blamed on demons? Today we call it the unconscious. It still speaks. It still wants control. But now we know its true name. And naming a thing has always been the first act of power. Since humans first looked into the fire and saw shapes dancing in the smoke, we have sensed that thought itself is porous, that something beyond the visible can slip inside it. Every civilization gave that mystery a name. The Greeks called them daimons, the Persians devas, the Arabs jinn, the Gnostics archons, the Christians demons. Across languages and centuries, they describe the same experience. Invisible influences that feed on human weakness and confusion. To the ancients, these entities were not necessarily monsters with form. They were currents of energy. Each emotion had a spirit attached. Wrath, lust, despair, envy. They moved through minds the way winds move through deserts. Unseen, but shaping everything they touched. In modern terms, we might call them collective thought forms. Patterns of fear or hatred that leap from person to person like psychic contagion. When an entire crowd succumbs to rage or hysteria, One could say an archon has entered the room. In Middle Eastern tradition, the jinn were beings of smokeless fire, neither wholly evil nor good, but amplifiers of human intent. They mirrored what they found. To a generous heart, they brought inspiration. To a greedy one, obsession. Psychologically, this mirrors how desire itself behaves. Unchecked longing begins as imagination and ends as enslavement. The jinn legend reminds us that the mind's creations can become our masters when we feed them attention and emotion. Gnostic mystics spoke of the archons, cosmic bureaucrats that weave illusion to keep souls asleep. Their weapons were ignorance and distraction. Replace their ancient names with modern ones. Algorithm, echo chamber, infotainment, and the pattern is clear. Anything that traps awareness in endless reaction serves the same function. The archon myth, stripped of theology, describes a systemic hypnosis, a world that teaches you to forget you are free. In spiritual language, possession occurs when a vibration of thought dominates the inner field. In psychology, it is fixation. In neuroscience, it is a feedback loop. Whatever the vocabulary, the effect is identical. The mind narrows. The body obeys. The person becomes vehicle rather than driver. Ancient exorcists used ritual and symbol to break that loop. Rhythmic chanting, confession, physical cleansing. Modern therapy achieves the same through conversation, insight, and medication. Both aim to restore self-awareness, the one force every darkness fears. Spiritual texts often claim that malevolent entities feed on fear. Translated into psychology, fear is simply attention multiplied by uncertainty. When we ruminate on catastrophe or doom scroll through bad news, we supply energy to the very patterns that exhaust us. In that sense, fear truly is food, not for demons, but for the endless engines of control that profit from anxiety. Not all influence arrives wearing darkness. Many traditions warn of the angel of light, ideas or leaders that appear enlightened yet conceal pride and domination. History repeats this warning endlessly. Charismatic cults, utopian revolutions, digital gurus promising transcendence through subscription. The danger is subtle because it flatters the ego. Whereas the shadow attacks through fear, the false light conquers through admiration. Both dissolve critical thought. Esoteric philosophy says that every thought carries frequency. Low frequencies, anger, greed, shame, attract similar vibrations. Higher ones, compassion, clarity, repel them. Even if we strip away metaphysics, the metaphor holds. Moods are contagious. Neuroscience calls it emotional contagion, mirror neurons transmitting effect from face to face. What mystics called raising vibration is simply choosing which emotions we amplify in ourselves and others. All faiths propose practices to maintain inner resonance: prayer, meditation, chanting, fasting, silence. Their outer forms differ, but their inner purpose is identical: to stabilize consciousness so it cannot be easily hijacked. When the mind is still, suggestion loses grip. In stillness, the whisper fades. This is why true mystics seek solitude, not to escape the world, but to hear the difference between their own voice and the echo of influence. Today's psychologists speak of schema therapy, mindfulness, and metacognition, ways to observe thought instead of obeying it. These are the scientific descendants of ancient purification rites. Where the priest used holy water, the clinician uses awareness. Both understand the same law. You cannot expel what you will not see. Whether one believes in literal spirits or symbolic patterns matters less than the insight the myths preserve. They remind us that consciousness is vulnerable, that ideas can take on lives of their own, and that morality begins with vigilance. When a population forgets this, collective possession follows: mob violence, fanaticism, totalitarian worship. The evil force then wears human faces. The ancients saw the cosmos as a drama of light and shadow. Today we call it psychology, sociology, information theory. Different languages, same truth. The mind is a doorway, and what enters depends on what we invite. guard the doorway, and the puppeteers, whatever names they wear, lose their strings.